to and subsidize them, they lose their job and they lose their houses. So it doesn't work. So we should always have the moral high ground when we argue for limited government. But we have lost that argument generally over the years because we don't have the right answers and say, oh yes, you guys don't care. You don't care about the poor. You're not going to take them. Too often we concede and say, oh no, but we'll take care of the ones who really need it. Now that's awfully tempting, but the reason I reject that, let's say there's 1 or 2% that always really need it, and that probably is the case. But that's better than 30% unemployment, you know. Yeah. So that 1 or 2%, when you concede that, you concede 100% of the principle of redistribution. So the motivation that's promoted by the liberals is to take care of those poor people who are suffering. At the same time, the liberals join some Republicans who are bailing out the rich and protect Wall Street and the military-industrial complex and on and on. And it's total deception. If we really care about the poor people, we have to show to them that the only humanitarian system is the free market system, the freedom system, low taxes and less regulations and local government.
Yeah.
That argument is more difficult to sell when they are living beyond their means and we seem to be benefiting by it and the borrowed money is there and people keep loaning us money. But now we're moving into this new era where people are starting to realize they don't trust government. They don't believe government when they say something. Now, it's a discouraging argument, and if you look at what's really happening, it's not exactly exhilarating because there's a lot of problems ahead, and I believe they're going to get a lot worse. I'll tell you where I get excited is when I talk to young people who are willing to accept the arguments of liberty and markets and sound money and the whole work. And this is happening on many campuses. I remember the first time during the last campaign when I was in Michigan that I barely mentioned the word Austrian economics in the Federal Reserve, and they went wild. I mean, this is on a liberal college campus, and so I knew that the seeds of the revolution was starting to sprout up. And a lot of people give me a lot of credit for initiating that, but it is not me. It is that maybe I captured it, I timed it in such a way, but I was bound to get the timing right. I tried for 35 minutes. The seeds have been sown for a long time. There's been a lot of education going on. And although this is a very partisan audience, our enemy, bad ideas, are in many ways bipartisan. And we did have a president once said that we're all Keynesians now, and he was absolutely right. But I don't want us all to be Keynesians. I want us to lead the charge for freedom, individual liberty, and private property, and tell them there's another system of economics other than Keynesian economics where they want to have economic planning.
Yeah.
Individual liberty is precious in many ways. The founders understood that it was a sound whole principle. Freedom of your life. Your life comes from a creator, not from the government. The Constitution was written not to hold anything back and to regulate your life or your economic well-being. The Constitution was written to strictly restrict and restrain the government from interfering with you taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
Something happened approximately 100 years ago that we got off track, and liberty got chopped up into two pieces. One, it was economic freedom, and one, it was social freedom. But how can it be any different? If you have a right to your life, you have a right to your liberty, and you have a right to take care of yourself and work hard, you ought to have the right to keep what you earn. You ought to have that right. So it should all be one. But your economic liberty should be identical to your religious liberty or the way you, whatever your lifestyle is. The real problem there is, and the best way I can demonstrate this is, people understand the First Amendment. Nobody ever says the First Amendment is written only to protect non-controversial speech. It's rather in bad shape if that were the case. The First Amendment is there to protect us participating. And fortunately, we're still recognizing we can campaign and we can speak out, and so far so good. But when it comes to personal behavior, some people don't like that because they're afraid what people might do. Religiously, we accept that notion. Freedom of religion. One of the prime reasons we had a new country, because we weren't to be told about what religious values we have or whether we have them at all or not. But so often it comes that some people want to regulate our personal behavior. They don't want you playing poker, and they don't want you drinking and things like that. But if you believe in the First Amendment and you believe in liberty, you believe that we as individuals have the obligation. If we have the obligation to make our decision about our eternity, we ought to have the right to decide what we put into our minds and our body. That's less important than our eternity, and yet we are protected. That understand that very clearly, and they say, yeah, let them be, don't tell them what to do with their personal lifestyle, maybe because they want to have a wild lifestyle themselves. But then they'll come along and say, yes, it's great to have social liberty, but we can't trust you with your economic liberty because it will be unfair, and we have to take care of the people who are going to fall through the cracks and all that, not realizing that the special interest will take hold of it. But it is one unit. It is one unit. You defend liberty, and you'll defend personal liberty, religious liberty, freedom of speech, owning weapons, and whatever you need. That would be defended if we understand that. So, in order for us to solve it, it's my opinion that you have to put that back together. That if you're uncomfortable with allowing people to make their own choices, that's one thing. But if you're at the point where you think you have to regulate your economic life, of course, that opens up a can of worms, and that's where we have been. Freedom is a very new idea in the history of time. Thousands of years of recorded history, but the experiment is just a couple hundred years. And we had a grand experiment here, and it's been the greatest and the best, and we have benefited. But what drives me and motivates me is I see us giving up on it too soon. This is why I go out and talk. And I don't know what the expectations are or what the future will bring. But I do know the driving force for me is to make sure that as many people as possible know what is important. And that is putting this puzzle back together, defending liberty as a whole, seeing that it is just a new experiment, and the little bit of test that we have had in these few hundred years, it eradicated the poverty that lasted for thousands of years. It looks like we could throw it away if we don't do it. Now, I talk to crowds like this, and, this is a nice crowd, everybody's pleased with it, but you're always going to be a small number. People are always going to look to activists for ideas, and it's going to be a small number. But once you discover this, once you discover free markets and our history and the Constitution and all this, really the burden falls on you, and it's heavier. It's heavier because you have more obligation to speak out. The people who live from day to day and they don't care, they never will. That's the way history is. But the people who are interested, study and learn, and you care about it, you should be uncomfortable if you're not participating. So if you're not doing your maximum, I hope you go out of here uncomfortable. Can do. We do not have to, so many young people come and they get off on tangents, they get excited and interested, but they want to say, how do I become a congressman? I said, the most important thing I can tell you is don't set that as your goal. Don't set that as your goal. Besides, you can always trust those congressmen anyway. But set your goal to learn and study and understand and how to answer the questions. And then Leonard Reed taught me something many years ago for the Foundation of Economic Education. He said, if you do that and you make yourself available, somebody will make use of you. Rather than saying, this is my goal, this is what I'm going to do. Do your best to excel, offer up, and you will find something. What one person is capable of doing, the other person isn't. Some people can run for office. Some people support others. Some get into political action in a party. Others are teachers, and others are writers. Others can produce movies and other things. So everybody has a role to play. Those who know and understand the desperate need to promote this message have an obligation to do something. This is why I come and speak and try to spread this message.